Hello, everyone. I just read the absolute best book that I wanted to tell you about, and it is called The Offing by Benjamin Myers. So, this book was absolutely phenomenal. It definitely is the best book I've read this entire summer, and so I wanted to tell you a little bit about it. The structure of this book is really interesting. It's one of those books that's kind of an older individual telling you a story, and so it starts off with this old man and ends with him again at the end. And in between, you are just launched into his retelling of this summer in which he is 16 in the north of England, wandering about, just trying to figure out his life.
I marvel at the minor miracle that my body has held out this long. Sometimes it feels as if it is held together by little other than strings of memories and sinews of hope. The mind is a museum coated in dust. Sitting here now by the open window, a glissando of birdsong on the very lightest of breezes that carries with it the scent of a final incoming summer. I cling to poetry as I cling to life.
So as I said, this takes place when our main character, Robert, is 16. To give you a little bit idea of where this story takes place and when it takes place right after World War II. So Robert is kind of just off on a walk, off on an adventure that he sets off on because he knows that his future is basically to be a miner, to be a coal miner. And that's not what he entirely wants of himself. It's almost like he needs this epic adventure before he settles down into doing what he knows he needs to do. And he just needs a bit of exploration ahead of time, both to discover more about himself and obviously to just explore the north of England before he goes literally underground as a miner.
Only when alone in the wild had I ever come remotely close to beginning to know my true self.
As I said, this takes place after World War II, and the war is just really pervasive in the text. So as Robert is navigating this landscape, he literally comes across signs of war, just airplanes that were downed in fields, just left there. But also this idea that the war is still pervasive in everybody's points of view and in their minds and just in their anxieties about life, about eating and eating too much or just enough, or kind of still having that rationing mindset, and also in people's thoughts as to just this idea of war and the fear that there could be one day another war, and that some little man, as one of the characters in the book says, could take charge again and there could be another war. So you see how much the war physically and emotionally impacts the landscape in which this book takes place. Another thing that I found beautiful as someone who loves to hike and backpack and just be present in nature is Robert's noticing that when he's in nature and when he's on this walk, exploring how his mind and his body kind of sync. It's as if his footsteps and his walking kind of make everything correlate and run together, and how everything is just kind of in sync and in a state of flow. And I deeply connected to his description of how it feels to be walking in nature and how it kind of regulates your body and kind of returns you to baseline, and at the same time gives you the sense of wonder and awe and beauty about the landscape around you.
Travel is a search for the self, trust me, and sometimes just to search is enough. Wander around long enough with your eyes open, and soon enough you'll find things. Great journeys are never about the destination.
So Robert is just wandering about the north of England with a tent and not a whole bunch of other equipment. He is just wandering around from town to town, meeting up with random people along the way, and because he is in England, makes friends by talking about the weather, as you do. Eventually, he meets this woman named Dulcie. He kind of stumbles upon this cottage, and there's Dulcie in this cottage by the sea. Dulcie is an incredibly tall woman. She's very much older than him. You don't really entirely know her age, but kind of more of like a retirement aged woman. And she lives alone in this cottage by the sea with a dog. So I guess not completely alone. But they begin a friendship, and it begins by her basically asking him in for tea. And the quote that she says is just so beautiful. She said, "A pot of tea for your story seems like a fair trade." So as the story goes on, the bulk of the story is in Robert's relationship with Dulcie and how they become friends despite the differences in their ages and the differences in their upbringing and experiences. There's so much that comes up through their conversations, and that's why I was underlining so much, just finding all these beautiful quotes and all the ways that the author really allowed life to be discussed at a deeper level through the conversations between Robert and Dulcie. So some things that came up were this idea of, do you plan a life or do you allow life to happen? Do you allow stuff just to come to you because you're open to different opportunities and different things, or are you a goal-setting individual who has their entire life planned out? And there's almost this idea that it's better to be open to what life could offer you as opposed to just having your plan in place and following it no matter what else happens. There's queer themes in here, which I loved and just make this book so warm and welcoming. There's also this idea of friendship, obviously, because Robert is friends with a woman who's much older than him, and just how you can benefit with friends that are different from you, and just the different ways that friendship can look. There's also the idea of romance and how we have this traditional view of romance, but could it be more than that? Does romance also mean a sense of wonder and awe for the natural world, or is it only about a relationship between two people that love each other? There's a lot of discussion on politics and war because the war has just ended, and about how it stays with you afterwards, and how it's kind of shaped the way that you view others and how you view the world. And then also, like any good book, there is a discussion of books and poetry and how much you are impacted by the words and the language in text that you love. As I said, this is a book that I read with a pen. And one of the parts that really stuck out to me that I want to elaborate on a little bit more was the part at the end, or towards the end, where Robert was kind of describing this relationship that had developed between him and Dulcie. And the way he was describing it reminded me of my relationship with my therapist. So I don't know if anyone else goes to therapy, but it's a very unique relationship that you have between you and your therapist. Robert describes how Dulcie basically accepted him as he was and welcomed him fully and completely. And that's 100% what happens in therapy. And I think that it's this manner of being seen that really allows you to transform as a person. And Robert describes this, and I definitely connect to it, that being seen in this way allows you to transform as a person, where the person that you become is somebody that was always there, but it's almost like they're uncovering through their relationship with you. They're uncovering this new person that had always been there, but had never been allowed to exist. And so I'll put the quote after this, but I deeply connected to it and I found it so beautiful.
More than that was the unshakable thought that Dulcie had seen me in a way entirely unprejudiced by familiarity, history, or expectation. That is, she had taken me as she found me. And not only that, but had seen fit to treat me as someone worth bothering with. Not quite an equal, for it was clear that she was a wise, worldly, and original person, and I was none of these. Yet in our brief time together, I had begun to feel as if I was becoming someone else. I was approaching being myself rather than the person I had been living as. Dulcie had seen me as I was and had not been bored or uninterested.
So I would highly recommend this book to anybody that likes a slow, quiet book that will dig deep at the bigger questions in life and bigger thoughts, and that also has that summer feel without being a summer beach read. Yes, this takes place by the sea, and yes, it takes place in nature, but it's so much more than that. There's so much depth, there's so much beauty, there's so much poetry, and I just think it is the perfect book for summer. So please let me know if you've read it. Let me know if you want to read it now. Tell me your favorite read of the summer. I will talk to you guys soon, but I really hope that you pick up this book.